what a day we had yesterday. Number one recruit, Jackson Cantwell, off the board, commits to Miami. But, last night I went back and Jackson Cantwell did an update on this channel with Philip Duke 6 months ago. He barely mentions Miami. He says in passing that they are a team that he's talking to, but then goes on for 11 minutes to really just talk about Nebraska, Missouri, and LSU. What did Miami do in these last, 3-4 months to get where they are today with Jackson Cantwell's commitment?
I think a big thing, Josh, is getting him back on campus this spring. For me, that's kind of where it started to kind of really, at least put Miami in that conversation that, he went back to Miami, he went back to Michigan, went back to Ohio State. Those were the three trips he wanted to get to unofficially this spring before he really started to think about decision timeline and even does he want to take, 3, 4, 5, OV, stuff like that. Getting back down there, seeing a spring workout, spending more time with crystal ball, mirror ball, getting a better, deeper feel for the culture, what they're trying to build there in the ACC. Obviously the buzz around, Cam Ward being potentially at that time the number one pick in the NFL draft, trying to use that as well to kind of show Cantwell where he can be, what he can do there at Miami. I think to me, that's really where Miami kind of initially made that move to kind of put themselves in that position to be one of those final hats on the table. And then things took off from there, from the conversations to, we know NIL is a factor there, to playing time opportunity. He loved the two-headed offensive line coach with Mirabal and Cristobal, both with O-line backgrounds. So I think the key turning point, though, for Miami, at least based on what I know and what I've been told, was getting him back on campus instead of going to, a place like Georgia or back to Missouri or something like that at that point, even Oregon at that point. He went to Miami instead, and Miami really did a great job of answering those questions on that visit and putting themselves in a better spot coming out of it.
Yeah, and there was times where it seemed like maybe Oregon was the front runner coming off some of those trips. Georgia certainly was a team that up until the last 48 hours, everybody thought that's probably where Cantwell was going to go. But in the end, Miami, Mario Cristobal just never backs down. Speaking of not backing down, I want to talk about a couple more important offensive line targets for the Canes. And they're all right there in the state of Florida. They're not necessarily from the state of Florida, but they're playing at IMG Academy. And we're going to talk about Keenyi Pepe right now, committed to USC over Miami, 6'7", 325 pounds, one of the most coveted offensive tackles in the country behind Jackson Cantwell. Is this one over, or does Miami still have a shot at Pepe?
Look, the kids come out now and say, hey, I've shut my recruitment down. I mean, what does that really mean? I mean, there's still conversations being had, and we know all of them have agents and their ears are always open too. So it's a different game in recruiting now. I would say that USC is in a very good position to hang on to Pepe as of right now. But like you said yourself, Josh, Mario Cristobal does not back down. He's not going to give up on a guy like that. Like you mentioned, Pepe's at IMG Academy right there in Bradenton, Florida. So easy to get to if he wants to get to a game, this fall. An easy trip for him from Bradenton to Coral Gables. But look, his family's on the West Coast. He's from the West Coast. He went back-to-back weekends to USC on his own dime earlier this spring, gave them a commitment. So look, Miami's not going to give up, but he's going to be a tough flip in my eyes for Miami.
All right. Now, another pair of big men from IMG, Johnny Jones and Brett Colajay, both have been on Miami's radar. Do you think the Canes have a shot to lock down either of these monsters?
Yeah, if I had to pick one out of those two right now, I like their position for Colajay. I think it's Miami versus Georgia. We kind of saw that with Jackson Cantwell and how that ended up a day ago, where Miami ends up victorious there for the 5-star plus offensive tackle from Missouri. Can they do the same for the versatile O-lineman at IMG Academy? Look, he's from Colorado, moved into IMG Academy, and I think he ends up, as of right now, somewhere in the South, either in that 305 in Miami or the 706 of Athens, Georgia. I think those are the top two schools. He's visited over 10 schools this year alone, so a lot of schools are in play, but I think Miami has a very good, realistic shot to keep Colajay in state.
All right, let's talk about a couple more in-state targets that the Canes are chasing. Now they got momentum. I mean, you land the number one player in the country, recruits start to take notice. So let's talk about Derrek Cooper, who's been taking some out-of-state trips, but we know the South Florida prospect has love for the Canes.
Yeah, look, they have Javion Mallory, running back committed from West Boca Raton right there in South Florida. They want to add a second piece to that room at running back, and I think nobody's higher than Derrek Cooper. You can list other guys like a Jay Lamar in South Georgia. He's high on their list as well. But I think they start with the hometown kid right there, Chaminade Madonna. They recruit players from that high school, that power program in South Florida every year. They would love to add Cooper. Like you said, he's visited out-of-state schools like Auburn, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, schools like that. This spring, he'll take a lot of OVs as well. But I think his recruitment has to start right there in his backyard at the University of Miami. He loves the coaching staff. He's been there more than any other school. It's right down the road. I think it's pretty easy to see. He's extremely tight with his mom and his family. So having his mom right there close to home, she'd be able to get to every game, obviously, at Miami pretty easily. I think that could be a factor in the end. But I think Miami's doing a great job. And look, they know it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Could Derrek Cooper, like other schools, higher on his list at different times? Sure. But in the end, in December, I think Miami has a real shot to land him as well.
All right, let's swing over to St. Thomas Aquinas right there in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and talk about On3's number 5 ranked corner, Justice Fitzpatrick. This sounds like another battle that's going down in the Southeast.
Yeah, I think, again, it could go back to maybe Miami versus Georgia. We don't talk a lot. Usually it's more Alabama, Georgia, Auburn, Georgia, schools like that. But it's, this one just this time has multiple guys looking at the same two schools and high on the same two schools. And where we start at here is the connection. Obviously, Justice's brother played at Alabama, Mika Fitzpatrick, who was on that staff. Mario Cristobal coaching O-line for Nick Saban. Kirby Smart coaching DBs for Nick Saban. So, look, he's a big family guy, and their entire family is involved, from Mika to mom to dad. All those people go on trips with Justice. They talk to the coaching staffs. It's not just about the right culture. It's about the right scheme, where they feel safe for their son being. Where does Mika think Justice can develop the most as a defensive back? So a lot of questions get asked to these different coaching staffs. And look, Miami is very much in this one as well. And I think he's pretty open, from Ohio State to Texas to Georgia, to multiple schools like Miami. And I would say Miami has as good of a shot right now today going into the OVs, if not a little bit better, than anybody else. But like you said, I think Georgia and Miami, again, are positioned well to be in this one until late.
All right, let's stay in South Florida. Wide receiver Calvin Russell, he's got a big visit this weekend to the Florida Gators. I think that's an official visit, but they're having a big visit weekend down there in Gainesville, and Russell will be a part of it. Do you view the Gators as the Canes' biggest competition here?
No, I would go up north to Syracuse. Look, we've talked about this before. Miami Northwestern, I think they put, I want to say, 4 guys at Syracuse last year in that class. Obviously, Calvin's been there 4 or 5 times already to Syracuse. Look, he got on the road this spring and did a lot of visits, from West Coast to Southeast. I mean, he saw a lot of different schools. I think Oregon made a pretty big impression on Calvin Russell. But I think you have to start with, Miami, as far as when you talk about his recruitment. He's from Miami Northwestern. He's been to Miami a lot. His mom is in the Miami Hall of Fame for track and field. She went to school at the University of Miami with the wide receivers coach, Kevin Beers. So they have that kind of relationship there as well. Kevin Beers, speaking of him, is one of the most, I think, well-liked receiver coaches in the game right now, as far as being able to bond with players and recruits and kind of talk about just life and things outside of football. So you're doing a great job with Calvin Russell. But look, Miami's going to be in this race until the end. You mentioned like a Florida. They have some ground to make up in my eyes. To me, Syracuse is Miami's biggest competition. And I may even give Syracuse a slight edge, maybe in his recruitment going into this next phase of his recruitment. But look, Miami's going to go hard after him. They have multiple connections other schools cannot offer Calvin Russell. So I think Miami has a great shot to make a pretty big and significant move in the coming months.
All right, we can't talk Miami recruiting without talking the tight end position. Miami has their sights set on two really good ones out of the California area. We're talking Mark Bowman and Israel Briggs. Miami takes a big swing here at tight end. Who do you think they have a better shot at right now, Bowman or Briggs?
Yeah, I would lean Briggs there. Both those guys, like you said, West Coast guys from Southern California. Briggs, one time committed to Arizona State, has taken some trips. Miami, I feel like from what I get out of his camp is, if not the top school, probably a top two with LSU right now. He loved his trip to Michigan here recently. Cal will get an OV. Texas A&M will get an OV. But I think Miami, if not leading, is definitely a top two school for Briggs, where with Mark Bowman, the five-star from Mater Dei, I think right now Georgia and Texas are kind of setting the pace in that race, but he will take an OV that May 30th weekend to Miami. He had a very good visit in April to Coral Gables. That kind of opened his eyes and kind of put Miami in the position to get an OV at the time. Month and a half ago, I would have said Miami does not get an official visit from Mark Bowman. So him getting back down there early, mid-April changed that and kind of put them in the mix. But they have more ground, I think, to make up with Bowman. I'm not saying it can't be done, because it can. Yeah. But if I had to pick one they're in the better spot with right now, it'd be Izzy Briggs.
All right. And, after the landing Jackson Cantwell, nothing seems impossible for Mario Cristobal and his staff. So, Canes fans, talk to Chad and I. Who are you guys feeling really good about right now? Got to be a couple of them. Let us know.